Hi everyone, my name is David Drever. I am an Associate Director of Productivity and a Microsoft 365 MVP specializing in Microsoft 365 and security.
Hi, I'm Joanne Klein. I work for Next Novus, my own company, and I work with Microsoft Purview with my customers. Um, we have been talking about insider risk management and several of the features that integrate with it. So today's topic is data loss prevention. Um, Data loss prevention is nothing new and it's been around for a while. And in fact, there are multiple types of data loss prevention in Microsoft Purview. I'm covering the four there. Um, One of the big ones is Microsoft 365 Cloud DLP. So that would be things like you're sending some sensitive information in an email, and Exchange will, pop up a policy tip for you, perhaps block you from doing what it is you're about to do. Maybe you're trying to send something sensitive outside the organization. And, it can work in a similar fashion across SharePoint when you're working in Office apps in there, in OneDrive, even in Microsoft Teams, if you were to share, let's say, sensitive information in a Teams channel conversation with someone external to the organization. Um, you can, in fact, use endpoint DLP where there can be some controls put in place when you're working on, let's say, your Windows 11 machine, and perhaps you're trying to copy some sensitive information onto your clipboard or copy it to a USB or even print something that's sensitive. And then there's non-Microsoft 365 apps and even on-prem DLP. All of these things can be integrated and help inform insider risk management. DLP all up can prevent unauthorized use of sensitive data. Got these out of order. It kind of has a two-way relationship with insider risk management. First of all is a DLP alert can have a severity level with it. So if you have a high severity DLP alert, it in fact can be a triggering event for an insider risk management policy. And the reverse is true in that a DLP policy can understand a whole bunch of things about the content you're working with. How the data is classified, user risk. You can see I haven't read there. So what that means is the adaptive protection capability that David and I talked about on insider risk management a while ago. Insider risk management assesses the data related activity and assigns a risk level to a user in your organization, minor, moderate, or elevated. And a DLP policy can understand that and use that as a condition to dynamically apply a DLP policy action based on that user risk. So there's no administrator trying to adjust the DLP policy for a particular set of users if they're deemed risky. It just happens in the moment, kind of dynamically, as activity is going on across your organization. So this is an example of a really good integration between two Microsoft Purview solutions. Do you have anything to add to this?
Yeah, actually I do. One of the things I was thinking about here is that some things I've had from clients that I work with is that the endpoint DLP sometimes can be a sticky point because organizations figure that if they want to do endpoint DLP, they have to go with Windows Defender. And to be terribly honest, you don't. You do have to have Defender there. Like, say, for instance, you like CrowdStrike. I worked with a couple organizations where CrowdStrike, they love CrowdStrike. They want to use it, ignoring the whole debacle that happened earlier this year. But, that aside, they really like the CrowdStrike. And I get that. You can actually enable Microsoft Defender for Endpoint in passive mode. And what that allows you to do, though, is still enable endpoint DLP. And those signals that Joanne was talking about, that the pieces that you need in order for it to integrate with insider risk management, that's there now, because even though MDE isn't doing anything, it's still sending those signals through the endpoint DLP component of it to Purview, and thus insider risk management. So you were still getting that endpoint without having, to change your endpoint monitor.
Excellent point. Yeah. And this is an example where you might already have DLP set up in your environment. In many organizations, this is kind of the first step into Microsoft Purview, either, sensitivity labels or data loss prevention. So this is a very easy integration with insider risk management. You probably already have policies configured. Use an insider risk management user risk level as an additional condition in your existing DLP policies to kind of level them up, if you will, make them a little bit more dynamic and purpose targeted specifically to different risk levels.
Yep.
So I wanted to show this diagram to say the interplay between adapter protection, that feature that you need to enable inside insider risk management, and all of the risk levels that will be assigned basically to every user across your organization. These risk levels can change, by the way. You may be minor for a period of time and then start doing activity that bumps you up to moderate. And then, your risk level, the alert can either be dismissed, in which you will drop that risk level, or I think you can assign a period of time that you have to stay at moderate before you'll be dropped back down again. But each risk level can do different things. This is just a very simple example to show from the kind of the bottom up what an example of what you might want to do in a DLP action. Where and minor, you might only want to show a policy tip. As you get more risky, moderate, you may want to block but allow an override. Whereas at an elevated risk, you might want to just outright block. That's that example of somebody exfiltrating data, weeks in advance of them leaving the organization. They potentially could be elevated to elevated risk and maybe blocked by the DLP policy. Any comments on that?
Joanne. I actually have a question for you.
Okay.
So I know I have my thoughts around this, but I want your thoughts on when should we be looking at this? Should we be doing this on the first day we create IRM policies? When should we be looking at creating these adaptive protections within our tenant? Because I know this is a question I've heard.
Okay. I would enable those IRM analytics. We haven't really talked about that. Enable that first and foremost, so you can see the activity, get a sense for what end users are doing across your environment, and then enable adaptive protection. So you can, but really not take any action. You want to see, okay, how many users are in no risk, minor risk, moderate risk, elevated risk. And then based on that, you may want to adjust those thresholds that you had spoken about earlier in one of our earlier sessions to kind of even it out. You probably don't want to have a whole bunch of people in elevated risk. That's something I guess you have to dig into and figure out why is that happening. But that would kind of be my recommendation. What are you thinking?
I think that makes sense. Like from my perspective too, I was thinking about it from things you and I talked about in other sessions and together is, that crawl, walk, run, or that day 0, day 1, day 2, day 3. This is definitely not a day 0 or even a day 1, because from my perspective, you want to have your policies in place. You want to make sure that your policies are tuned. You want to make sure that your flags for elevated risk, moderate risk, and minor risk are pretty good place. And you can do that with things in monitor mode and things like that as well. But that's the biggest thing here. And this is one of the reasons I wanted to bring this up actually, was because I've had the question is when do we turn this on? And because adaptive protection, in my opinion, because adaptive protection is actually now has the capability, you can see right there, you can block. You don't want to do that until you're sure that things are fine-tuned and ready to go. Yeah,
agreed. And I'm going to summarize this. I think there's kind of 2 controls you can have in place there. One is turn on adaptive protection, but don't in fact use that risk level on the downstream features. Just see how many users are going in each of those levels. And then the second one is if you have the ability on the downstream features, DLP you certainly do, to monitor and not block in this case, but you will see that that DLP policy will be triggered, and then that may be your next step before you full on enable all of these policies, because these are definitely end user impacting policies that you're setting up. In this case, based on elevated or user risk. So they're important. And I think that's the whole thing behind adaptive protection. But you want to be pretty sure you've got this right, because it's going to impact end users trying to do their work.
But really, the bottom line here, Joanne, I think, is that this is, I think you may mention one of our other sessions is that, users are saying like, inside risk management isn't stopping people from doing this. It's just reporting on it. Well, adaptive protection is your ability for inside risk management to stop people from doing
yes.
So
that's
the key thing right here.
Yeah, it's a pretty important control, but you have to make sure you got it right. Yeah. Awesome. So that was data loss prevention and insider risk management. So stick around for our next session where we're going to talk about the next feature. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.